I had some trees on my land to start off with, and I needed to make sure they were safe. They had ash dieback, so I started cutting them down throughout the year, and it got to a certain point where I needed to get an arbiter in because they were quite dangerous, and I couldn't go any further. And we let everyone know in our close that, that these trees were going to come down. And we did it on the day, took them down, moved all the wood, and then 2 or 3 days later, started getting some very strange texts and emails from people.
Well, more than one person. Was it like
it was one couple.
One couple.
Yeah, they were, and a few people said, around the area, you've cut the trees down. That's good because they looked unsafe. So, but it kind of opened up a viewing area. And we bought brand new hedges. We put new trees in. They need to grow up. We planted those trees, and we let everyone know we were doing that. But this particular individual took umbrance to the whole situation, and was literally one night when I was coming back from the neighbour's house. I set the PRR light off, and he was waiting there, and eventually he assaulted me. Really?
He assaulted you?
Yeah. So. We tried to talk out. I tried to talk him out of that. I didn't really engage. There was a side of me that wanted to engage, but I kept thinking, don't engage, you could lose your guns. Don't engage, you could lose your guns. And so I tried to get back to my property, which I did. He cut me off, and he assaulted me. And he pushed me back, and I knocked my head on the back of my truck's tow bar and cracked my head open. And there was, with any head injury, there was a lot of blood. And it definitely straight away, you could see that he realised he'd stepped over the mark. And as the blood was pouring over my face and down my hands, I said, I think you've overstepped the mark, I'm going to call the police. And he just ripped his shirt open and said, I'll tell them you started it. And he said, and then if you call the police, I'm going to tell them that you threatened to shoot me with your guns.
Right. We're going to let you unfold this story over the 20 minutes you're on stage. Yeah. But I'm going to go to Peter now, because a lot of this comes from the fact that as a gun owner, as a certificate holder, you are suddenly at risk from your ex-boyfriends, your ex-girlfriends, and your next-door neighbours, aren't you? They can make an allegation, and that is enough for police firearms licensing to remove your certificate. Is that? Have I read that right?
That's exactly right. So they don't even have to call that person as a witness. The report goes to the decision maker, who can make a statement saying, I took into account this statement, or even intelligence, and that can be enough. There's some guidance as to how they should apply that sort of material, and it says that the weight to be given to untested material is less than that is given in evidence. But that doesn't stop you. And sometimes one can understand, if one ex-wife or one ex-partner says you're violent, and may have an axe to grind, well, that may not be enough. But if 12 people are saying exactly the same thing, you can see why the police would act in the way that they do. But the reality is you can lose your certificate over unproven and untested allegations. And even in a case like this, where any objective look at the facts would have led you to the conclusion that Chris was the victim of crime, and not someone who committed a crime.
Now, I think, going back 20 or 30 years, I remember asking my firearms inquiry officer, come on, Graham, why, you know my cabinet safe, why are you really here? And Graham said, frankly, Charlie, bruises on the wife. That's what I'm looking for. So it has ever been thus, hasn't it? But it seems that the law has been tightened to a point where it's being actively used to target shooters.
I'm not sure that the intention is to target shooters. What is undoubtedly the case is that in the last 5 years, the police have become much, much more risk averse, post Plymouth, frankly. So everybody... Sorry,
did you say that's the Plymouth shootings, tragic shooting of five people, including the death of the shooter?
Yeah, the single incident mass killing in Plymouth. So, very properly, they have reviewed every single certificate, and they will frequently say, although we gave you a certificate last time, actually a review looking back a little bit further, we made a mistake, and we're going to take your new ticket away even after 4 or 5 years, because in 2004 we were called to what was said to be a violent domestic assault, although no one said anything was going on. So they're much, much more risk averse. they would rather, understandably, the morning after something goes wrong, it wasn't the Chief Constable's picture on the front page of the newspapers saying, why did this man give X a gun? So they're operating a very risk-averse strategy. And in Kent's case, they said that they had a zero appetite for risk. And a zero appetite for risk means nobody can own a shotgun if you follow that through logically, because there's always a risk. It's about controlled risk, managed risk, and assessed risk. But a zero appetite for risk means, actually, we're going to come for your frying pan next.
You're such a lawyer, Peter. You're brilliant. Chris, what happened to you after the assault?
Well, the police turned up, and and they, to be fair, the police were really good. They didn't understand guns; they were just traffic cops, and they heard that guns were mentioned. They did an interview with me, and that was all on film. And then they went next door as well, and it turned out that, and we didn't know that he had guns, so they took his guns away and my guns away, and we kind of understood that, and I put them all away in cases and boxes, which I was quite glad I did, because you just handing them across.
I've heard of people seeing police clanking out with their guns loose in the bag. Yeah,
absolutely,
awful, yeah.
Loose in the bag, thrown in the back of a truck. And so on the night, it was quite, you're dealing with the fact that you've had this altercation, the police have been called. So it's quite confusing. It was only in the morning you suddenly realise the gravity and where you think it may go. So I just thought, right, where do I go? And I actually phoned up Kent Firearms, and said, look, this has happened. What do I do about it? Is there anything I can do to sort of, say that I didn't say that? And generally, I spoke to them once, and then after that, it was impossible to get hold of them.
Really? So this I hear this a great deal, that for whatever reason, underfunding, they don't want to be involved with it, they simply do not get back to you.
They just, I got a letter, an auto-generated letter saying, we're incredibly busy, don't contact us, we'll contact you.
Right. One thing about having your certificate revoked, is that what happened?
It is,
Yep.
Yep.
You go from being somebody whom society trusts, you are judged to be a better citizen than other people who don't have a firearms certificate. I know. I can see Peter's legal mind working on that one, but it is true to say that you feel like you have been kind of downgraded in citizenship to criminal to below average, which is quite a leap, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, everyone has, guys, you have to deal with the man pride. You've just been attacked by somebody you thought, that's out of order, and I did want to fight back, but I just kept saying, don't do it, don't engage. And then to have the police turn up, I'm 57, I've never phoned the police ever, only once. And when they turn up, they're more interested in getting the guns out of the house than they worry about the assault.
Really?
So, and I felt a criminal. I felt, I felt like I'd done something wrong. And even if it wasn't for people like Peter and Tim was my solicitor who's not here today, they said, no, you haven't done anything wrong. You just got to have the confidence to carry on, keep going.
So presumably you go to appeal. Is that what happens next?
Yes, yeah. So you get 21 days to appeal. You get a letter saying your guns are going to be destroyed after that 21 days.
Destroyed? Sorry, can I just pick that up? Destroyed, Peter? Really?
Well, they can't. You may not have a ticket, but you still own the gun.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a mistake. We love it when they make mistakes. I know from the media side. Okay, after destroyed?
And then one of my friends is in the audience today, Rob Pitcher, legal. And I phoned him up and said, this has happened. And he said, I know an extremely dodgy fellow called Peter Glenser. Rob phoned him up and Peter went, yeah, I'll definitely help, which I know how busy he is. And so
that's
I was
fantastic.
I didn't realise how beneficial that was going to be until later on. And then Peter put forward Tim as a solicitor, and Tim did all the legwork. He helped me get the references
that's
together.
Always the way with barristers, isn't it?
Yeah, he was sitting on the top and Tim was doing all the work.
But crucially, because the really big problem with this is it costs 20,000 quid to do it, and Basque came in and said, we will fund this. Is that right, Peter?
That's my understanding. I don't get...
You don't like to get yourself grubbing the question of money, why would you?
To be fair, my wife and I mean, it was the family and the wife, we were in it for a good 15 to 16,000.
You were, wow.
And we'd committed, our own money. And then Tim, we spoke to Bill at Basque, and we'd had said that there was a fighting fund, and I didn't realise that. And then Tim met Steve Shepherd from Basque at another challenge, another appeal, and he said, "Oh, you want to read this guy's bundle?" And it's just, he's a victim, and he's had his guns taken away, and all these horrible things have been said about him just aren't true. And they straight away they phoned me up on the Monday after that and said, "We'd like to pay Peter's costs," which was
that's marvellous.
Yeah, that made it up to like 50,000, wasn't it, or something like that?
Easily, yeah, exactly.
You got a heavy discount.
Just that linen suit, I'd have thought. Yeah, exactly. Peter, you don't, because you're a barrister, talk about specific cases, but bundles like this land on your desk from time to time. Is there an approach to them that you have, not perhaps standard issue, but are there points of principle here that you could draw from it and say, this is where we're going to get them?
Look, this was a really unusual case because there wasn't a shred of evidence against Chris, and that was a finding, which is in the judgment. No, we call it Wensbury unreasonableness. No,
Sorry, you call it what?
It's called Wensbury unreasonableness from a case. You don't need to know the details. No properly directed tribunal, in this case the Chief Constable, should have come to the conclusions that they did in Chris's case. And the court found that. Instead they victim blamed, and the court found that. So not only did we win, but they didn't contest our application for costs, but the court said that if they had contested it, we would have won that. And that's really important because it's not generally known, but the police are protected from cost applications. If you win, you pay your costs. If you lose, you pay your costs and their costs. Almost never, if you win, do they pay your costs. So this was a really significant victory for Chris because they had behaved so badly.
I've heard of 3 cases now where costs have been awarded, and all of them have been a Basque Fighting Fund case where you've come in and you've recovered the costs as well as winning the case.
There are a few more. I say you can't recover. In certain circumstances where they've been really unreasonable, I think we won costs once when somebody said part of his decision making was to regulate the flow of cases of certificates that were coming through because it was too much work in 1 year, and for that reason he decided that he'd throw that into the mix. So that was an easy win because again, Wensbury unreasonable. But so is there zero or risk intolerant, risk averse police. So you're normally dealing with allegations of domestic violence, bitter partners, drink driving, drink generally, what they call intemperate habits. If you're a bit fisty, if you're a bit handy, and the police have come to your house on a number of occasions, or you've come to adverse attention for some other reason, or I heard of somebody who said quite recently, very embarrassing, I was at a party and somebody, seeing the police came in, gave me a wrap of something which I put in my pocket, and imagine my surprise when I discovered it was cocaine. I mean, it was very shocking.
There you are. You're going to be stuck like that, aren't you? I mean,
yeah.
We've heard, I think, the most egregious version of this we heard. Well, apart from the ones where the police simply won't say why they've taken the guns away, and the poor victim, the gun owner, has to make an application and go through the kind of the anti-terrorist laws in order to find out. But we had one the other day in Scotland where he'd had an accident, I think, or it might have been another assault, but he'd fallen over, a small bleed on the brain, and he had to have physiotherapy, and they misread that as psychotherapy and therefore took his guns away, and they charged him for lying on his form for not mentioning it, and then they've had to backtrack from that position. So I mean, do you feel sorry for the police? Peter?
Why would I?
Well, because they've been landed with these ludicrous regulations by this mad Home Office Minister, Priti Patel. What are they supposed to do?
So the problem here is that gone are the days of discretion. So 20 years ago, your FEA would come round and he's running the rule over you. He's looking for bruises on your wife. He's making sure you haven't got 500 rounds of 2.2 in the cubby of the Land Rover that you normally keep there. He's assessing your competence. Now there are national decision-making models, and it's a tick box exercise. One of the questions, for example, that partners are asked and I struggle with this bit. Does your partner like hurting animals? Well, there's a garage full of pheasants hanging up, and there's a few deer in the freezer. I don't think he likes hurting them, but he's quite keen on eating them. But how do you answer that question? You know, is shooting something? I mean, veterinary people will say a well-managed death isn't a welfare issue, and we all strive as shooters not to inflict pain. We are harvesting a natural product. But it's a tricky question, isn't it, for shooters?
Do you feel sorry for the police, Chris?
I can appreciate what they're trying to do. Definitely don't feel sorry for them. In my situation, I've always been... I hope they learn from what happened, but the way they handled it and the way they made me feel, it just wasn't right. It didn't need to happen. I think when we won the case and... the police commissioner came over and said, well done. And I said, I haven't won here. Neither of us have won here today. I felt like I shouldn't have been here and you should have done your job properly.
So you don't feel they have learned very much from it?
Well, I'm hoping they will. I hope in terms of Basque, I mean, for me, this is why Basque memberships are so important, because they can take what happened to me and they can take the results of that court case and they can use that for good. You know, they can go back and say, look at this, you need to work on this. And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping the police learned from what they did, because it was a car crash for them, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
It really was. And they didn't come out shining from that. But that was 15 months of me being put through that. So, yeah, I don't feel sorry for them, but I do respect the fact they've got a tricky job.
I think we've got a problem coming, though. And I think that you just touched on it, which is closed material. So there is going to be a move, and they pool their knowledge through the National Police. Well, it doesn't matter, but they pool their knowledge. They are going to go to court with stuff they know about you, and they aren't going to tell you what it is.
Well, this is what we're finding with this particular deer stalker down in Devon, and he has been making application after application. And they played that annoying game of delaying and delaying. It almost feels like when he's in his 70s, it feels like they're hoping he's going to die and the problem's going to go away. It is that bad.
I know of one case where they're saying they're going to appoint what's called a special advocate to argue the withholding. I
think it's maybe the same case.
It's not the same case.
Oh, is it right? Okay.
And they're going to charge. They want to charge the applicant £50,000.
Yes. That's happening too. Yes, it is absolutely nuts. What do you do?
Get insured.
So you at Basque. This is the last question I'm going to throw to you. You are funding these cases. You're building this kind of wall of evidence and casework. Is there anything you can use from that? This slightly exceeds your role as barrister. It's more about your role in Basque. Is there anything you can use from that to change policy back to what it was, or to improve the policy they put out there? Because it seems to me that it's Priti Patel's policy that's at fault here.
I think the reality is that Basque gets involved in the training of firearms licensing officers. And the more training and the more contact there is. There was a time when your FEO, FLO would be a shooting man or woman themselves. That's gone. So you've got to make them understand who we are and what we do. And that should be able to colour the way that they answer those tick box questions. And the more involvement we have, the better. And frankly, the more publicity that successful cases get, the better.
Okay, and Chris, you still have a neighbour next to you?
I do, yeah. It's very interesting mornings when we go to work. Yes, I don't hold a grudge. You know, I'm not going to have the guy around for dinner or a beer, that's for sure. But I've moved on. That was one of the gifts of 15 months of having this, is that it took 6 or 7 months, and I just didn't care about him anymore. And it's good. So I don't look across and think anything of him at all, really.
I think you're amazing to have come through it and as being as even as you are. And Peter, I think you're amazing to have won it and got your costs. Well done.
Yeah, that was
Ladies and gentlemen,
that was brilliant.
Peter Glenser, Chris Sharp. Thank you very much.
Thank you.